So welcome to our March CAN meeting. I'm Ann Coffey, the CEO of CMPE, one of the coordinating hosts of CAN. And I'm going to ask everyone to put yourself on mute and stay on mute for the remainder of the meeting until we get to the Q&A or till you get into your Candid groups. So that will, I hear some feedback right now, so somebody is not on mute. Okay, hopefully they'll be off mute in a second. Or on mute in a second. So I want to start off by thanking each of you for coming. Your presence is helping us stay connected, deepening our understanding of what's happening in our community and learning together, which is central to co-creating the much needed change in our community. We have a lot to cover this morning, so I'm going to jump right in to read our guiding principles, which I do at every meeting to keep us focused on our purpose in this space. So first, we want to ensure authentic diversity, equity, and inclusion through all CAN work. Co-create priorities with a bias towards action and change. Share learning and ownership throughout the sector. Value strength of relationships over strength of individuals, power with versus power over. Expand what is good and assess opportunities for growth. Share and be a catalyst for connections, access, information, and resource flow. Exemplify and advocate. So this is an open space, and anyone who's interested in helping the nonprofit sector make greater impact is welcome and invited to join us. So please share this with your networks and your friends and colleagues in our nonprofit sector and nonprofit community. As a reminder, we will be recording the program portion of these sessions. The report out and discussion portions will not be recorded. We don't want anything to hold back the conversation and the candidness and things that need to be discussed. So we kicked off this public safety series in January. Our first meeting topic was the city's response to public safety, and Vincent James, Louisville Metro's Chief of Community Building, and Monique Williams, Director of Metro Louisville's Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods, joined us for a very robust conversation. That was a mouthful. And in February, we met with Police Chief Erica Shields about her vision and goals. And if you missed these meetings, they were recorded along with meeting notes on the CMPE site. All you have to do is go to cmpe.org and what we do, and you can find all the information about CAN. And this month's topic is the community's response to public safety. We have three very important leaders joining us this morning to share their perspective and experiences with us. Like past meetings, we will start out with an opening conversation, then move to our Candid breakout groups where you'll have an opportunity to connect and share with other members of the nonprofit sector and have a deeper discussion about this topic. Our guest, hopefully all of our guests, I'm not sure all, but I know at least one or two, will be with us when you return from your Candid groups, and we will continue the discussion. So I'm looking forward to this, as I know you are, and I'm going to turn it over to Anthony Smith, another co-host and the CEO of Cities United, and Anthony will introduce our guest and facilitate the opening conversation. So Anthony?
Yep, thank you, Ann, and good to see everybody this morning. I'm excited for this conversation, but also, saddened by why we have to have it. We've been, again, as CAN, hosting these conversations for the last 3 months, and will continue around the public safety theme because this city and this country is at a crisis, and we need to be addressing it as so. And really looking at this as a public health approach and the public health crisis that it is, and really putting our resources and our time and energy, and not just making sure that our kids can stay alive, but that we change the system so that they can thrive. So really want to spend some time talking through that. When I last looked at the numbers a couple of days ago, Louisville has experienced 48 homicides, and we're not all the way through the first quarter of the year. So we are sitting at a pace to outpace last year's homicide numbers, which we ended at 173. And we know that this takes all of us to address this issue. We, for far too long, have relied only on our law enforcement and other public safety entities to do this work. But we really want to bring a different lens to this and say that this is all hands on deck. All of us have a role to play, but some of us have a particular role to play. And the three folks that we're going to talk to today all play a unique role in addressing this issue and addressing it at its root cause, but also addressing it so that they can help our young people heal, right? Not just keep them out of harm's way, but also get some healing and some support around them to make sure that they can live better lives. So today we have Dr. Eddie Woods, who's the CEO and founder of No More Red Dots. You all will learn more about that as we go on. We also have Miss Deborah Barnes-Byers, project manager. I'm sorry, Miss Deborah, over at Pivot to Peace and Peace Ed. And then also Trinidad Jackson, who's the project manager for Youth Violence Prevention Resource Center here in Louisville as well. So we just want to have a conversation with these three. We need y'all. We want to introduce you all to those who don't know them, introduce those who do know, give you an understanding of what they're doing and why it matters in this city. So I just want to start the conversation off and start with Ms. Deborah and then go to Dr. Woods and end with Trinidad on the first question. Really is just introduce your work to the field and then also talk about, as you're talking about your work, what values undergird your work. Right. So as you talk about the work that you do, talk about the values that support and undergird your work. Let's start with Ms. Deborah.
Okay. Pivot to Peace we've actually been in existence in Louisville for 5 years. It'd be 5 years in a couple of weeks. And so some of the talking point that I received, the question was asked, what is it that sets you apart from other organizations in your approach to public safety? First and foremost, you have to have the right people in place. Not everybody can do this work. I have a phenomenal team. We are a family and we definitely work together. Secondly, I'm going to say we trust in the Lord to direct our paths. We have prayer in just about everything that we do. So we walk in prayer. Pivot to Peace is an evidence-based program and the model is being facilitated nationwide. This hospital violence intervention model has been in existence for 30 years. The model originated in Oakland, California with Youth Alive and in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. Ideally, survivors of violent injuries are initially contacted beginning in hospital settings and extending into the community. We now accept referrals from physicians, schools, families, and anyone can even self-identify. We currently serve the entire Jefferson County and we do not have an age limit. The HVIP, Hospital Violence Intervention Services, are provided, must be provided by culturally competent intervention specialists or caseworkers who often serve as in mentorship capacity. However, it's been known, I'm also called granny, mama, so they become very attached to those people working, brother, big sister. So, you know, relationship building initially is very important. My staff is neighborhood based and have either experienced violence themselves or have a family member or friend who has survived, who has been a survivor of violence. So we understand the trauma that is compounded by this type of injury. It can be a life-changing event. HVIPs are rooted in evidence suggesting that in the immediate aftermath of violent assault, victims, survivors are particularly receptive to making changes in their lives and altering behavior to prevent future injury. Thus, this window is often called as a teachable moment, and it is a unique opportunity to break cycles of violence. Pivot to Peace follows this model because it works. In the past 5 years, we've worked with 126 people, and we have had a 96% success rate of preventing recidivism and re-injury.
Thank you for that, Ms. Deborah.
Did you want me to address the values as well?
I will hold on that and come back.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Deborah. Yep. Dr. Woods. You're on mute, Doc.
All right, there we go. I'm good now.
You're good. Yep.
Okay. My name is Eddie Woods, and I'm the CEO of No More Red Dots. No More Red Dots has been around as an organization since 2011. I've been doing this work as an individual and with partnerships since 1995. What we do specifically is to intervene in gun violence situations, and our core belief is that no one is born a shooter or a killer. There are a lot of bad choices that come basically from being born in a miseducated, misinformed environment. So individuals get limited chances to develop in the whole lot more different than how it turns out. We get notifications on every shooting that happens in the city. We get it just about the same time that the police get theirs. We make deployment on those notifications based on whether they are homicides, or there's been serious injury, or somewhere that we've had that's been on our radar for a little while. We believe that the only way that you can impact gun violence in any community, I don't care where it is to interact directly with shooters. You have to have some kind of way that you take these networks that you have and get on the front end of retaliation. Most of the shootings that we have in our community are based a lot on retaliations or what's called get back. After we do the deployments, then what we do when we go to a shooting scene is to try to get a feel for what happened, who it happened to, those kinds of things like that, as well as who can help us to get to the individuals who might be considering carrying this farther. We usually have a pretty good feel for that based on the fact that I have 10 people that work with me. We do it all on a volunteer basis now, since we do not have funding. But these folks have been with me for a long time, some of them since as far back as the beginning, 1995. Each one of these people bring a network to the mix. Our people are trained as interventionists, de-escalators, as well as mediators. We use a transformative mediation model, which is the same model that I use in doing mediations for the U.S. Postal Service. So each of our people have been taught that as well. Once we get individuals, once we make contact with shooters, what we try to do is to get them involved in our programs, which makes us unique in and of itself, because our approach is to get folks into something that changes the dynamic for them, gives them the opportunity to do something different than what they're already doing. In other words, to experience some successes in some positive arenas. So consequently, it becomes important that we're able to maintain and keep our programs going. So far, we've been able to do it on a shoestring, and we're used to that now. We can do it that way. It's a lot better when we can do it at full volition. But we have people who have been involved in the neighborhoods, involved in street life. Our working model is that, our formula more or less, is that you go from being a participant to an ally to a worker. All of the folks that work with us now have pretty much come along through those particular ranks, including my own kids. So our programs, we have something that we call Peace Through the Arts. Peace Through the Arts deals primarily with taking a person's talent levels and try to improve it to the level that it can become an income. And within that framework, we have something that we call a Peace Press, which we teach silk screening and printmaking, writing contracts, reading contracts, marketing, all of those things that go into building a business. The dollars that go into that program go to the kids who are working the program. A portion goes back into the program itself. And that's probably at this point during COVID, one of our big programs. We're able to attract a lot of kids probably could do a lot more, but at this point, given the resources that we have, we're operating at about 12 kids, 12 young people who are working in the program, all of who have been impacted by gun violence. Though, and our relationship with DJJ, the Department of Juvenile Justice, we get referrals as they come out of custody, so that we can kind of stem the flow of individuals who go back into their communities and pick up where they left off or don't do anything differently. A lot of what we believe has come to fruition. We had 541 shootings last year. No More Red Dots responded to 122 of those shootings. Of that number that we responded to, we were able to do 77 interventions, and this is during COVID. Now we got two rather public health issues happening at the same time. Miss Deborah and myself and Trinidad, we have to deal with it in that way, where you actually don't have time to think about the impact of any particular thing. Most of the shooters and folks that we deal with were not adhering to any kind of public health issues. So consequently, we had it that way. And then finally, it's a matter of caring about your community to the level that you don't see yourself doing anything else. For me, and most of the folks who are on my team, they had an option in 2019, in July to be exact, 2019, to go out and get other jobs. I told them to go ahead and try to find some kind of way to support your families and whatever. And they did that, but they said that they had to also do this work because this work was important to our city and was very important to what they came up with. Most of them consider myself to have been the person that helped to raise them, so they feel like maybe they owe me something or something. But I'm very proud of them. This is what they do. They love their city, and this is what they do.
Thank you for that, Doc, and thank you for your service. Trinidad, can you talk to us about the Youth Violence Prevention Resource Center and the work that you all do?
Yes, sir. Thanks for the invite again. I actually sit in a unique position because I work with Pivot to Peace as well. And so that's how I got intimately engaged with Dr. Woods and Ms. Deborah at the Youth Violence Prevention Research Center. So what sets us apart from other organizations? I'm gonna give a little history as to how we came about. So if you all think back to 1999 when we had the Columbine High School mass shooting, there was a lot of public outcry, political will, and the window of opportunity that catalyzed movement, right? Critical movement to fund violence prevention at the federal level, particularly coming from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. And so in 2000, ever since the year 2000 up through today, there have been cohorts of academic and community partnerships that have been funded in 5-year cycles to engage in youth violence prevention initiatives and research. And so for the past 20 years, the bulk of that intervention, the bulk of that research has focused on the lower level functions of ecology, right? So if we look at interpersonal violence and say, we need to get a handle on the fighting, the homicides, et cetera, how do we do that? And so within the academic research and within our systemic approaches, we've said, we need to give these badass, primarily Black and brown kids social skills so that they know how to behave better. We need to engage their parents in parenting classes, right? So that they become better parents. And so that's been the overwhelming content that has, constructed what intervention has looked like as it relates to youth violence prevention. And so In 2015, right, that was the year of their last funding opportunity announcement, and we caught wind of it. And you know, I'm from St. Louis, by the way, and so I was fresh out of the Ferguson uprising. I returned back to the city, told my office, "Yo, like this is the work structurally that we need to be focused on as the office. We need to be addressing justice. We need to be addressing safety. We need to be addressing hope. We need to be addressing racial equity." And so, how do we do that with a violence prevention lens, with a public health lens, et cetera, from this office? And so it had just so happened that it aligned with the funding opportunity announcement. And so our approach was, yo, let's write this grant application and frame it in such a way that we are dealing with and incorporating alongside the interpersonal violence, some of the structural elements that need to be addressed within our communities as well. And so literally the first words of our application were Mike Brown, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, et cetera. And so that was the framing for our application process. Long story short, we were awarded the funding. And so it was a matter of, okay, what does violence prevention research look like within a particular geographic area, right? And so within our city, we know that that's been heavily characterized as the West End is the most violent place in the city. How do we address geographically some of the interpersonal issues in addition to the structural issues, but also demographically, right? So the other part of that, if we look at geography and demography, we know that there's been the narrative placed on Black people that we are the most violent, right, people within our communities. And so instead of just engaging, you know, the West End, Black kids in the West End as research participants, you know, we said, now we need to hire them, right? One of the critical aspects of violence, interpersonal and structural, is structural poverty. And so we can't just engage them in filling out surveys and engaging them in interviews. We have to hire them. But we also, as part of that hiring process, they can't be, right? They can't be robots within a workspace. They can't engage in technical aspects of what we do from a research perspective. They have to critically understand the political, the social, the economic forces that have created the demise of their communities, and also understand how do we engage in liberatory behaviors in order to fight against, not only fight against the systems, but also create the futures, the environments that they want for themselves and their communities. And so that was a novel approach, right? And we had, it's been an arduous road with funders, right, such as the CDC at the federal level, operating up under a Trump presidency, talking about fighting white supremacy, talking about Black liberation, racial and ethnic identity development. So, right, these are some of the constructs and some of the approaches. You know, as Anthony, you mentioned, like what values undergird our work. When we look at what justice and equity looks like and how we obtain that for ourselves as professionals, for our communities as community dwellers, that means we have to look at the cultural and the structural violence that is driven by white supremacy, but then also understand what that has done to us as Black people, right? So the internalized racism and how we have to navigate the interpersonal and the structural racism and how we combat that. And so for us, that has meant equipping young people with again, leadership development, racial and ethnic identity development. Healing, as you mentioned, has been so critical, ensuring that their healing is central to everything that they engage in, because we're talking about, right, uncovering and acknowledging explicitly a lot of the generational trauma that they've had to endure, and also recognizing that that trauma is consistent. Right, as Angela Davis says, you know, freedom is a constant struggle, and dealing with trauma is a constant struggle when we have to respond to oppressive environments. And so, you know, some of their critical social action outcomes has looked like creating Black student unions in the face of structural opposition from principals and administrators at their school systems, as well as, right, white parents and students. Why do we need a Black student union? That's racist. That's reverse racism. And having to engage in that critical process. Liquor store protests that have been predatory racial predatory capitalism that has existed with Family Dollars and engaging them in the oppositional process to that, partnering with Metro Council and community and the alcohol board control to ultimately get them to deny that liquor license for Family Dollar. And education sessions in high school that our young people have been leading around structural and cultural violence and also liberation, right? So those are some of the things that characterize what we do, how it's been different from what's been done historically, and how that is helping to empower them to claim and create the type of future that they want for themselves and their communities.
No, thank you for that, Trinidad. I appreciate that. And I just want to just underline a couple of things that I've heard between the three. One is that we have folks who are putting themselves in harm's way to save our young people and save folks, and they're underpaid, they're under-resourced. They could do so much more with more support from the community. You heard Ms. Deborah said they work with over 120 folks, but then you heard Dr. Wood say we had over 500 plus folks shot. Just imagine what Ms. Deborah and her team could do if we had the right resources. And imagine how many of those folks would not get shot if we had Dr. Woods and his team able to be out. But then also, just to Trinidad's point, if we just change the structure and address the structural racism and the issues that we're dealing with as a city and as a country, and have different conversations and really demand different outcomes. So just think about the themes that we're hearing and how each of us have a role to play in this conversation, whether we're working in a nonprofit, in a foundation, or whatever our role is in the community. We need to be supporting and thinking about how we show up for these communities. I want to go back to Ms. Deborah so we can talk a little bit more about your values that you started on, Ms. Deborah. And then I'll go to, I'm going to come back to you, Trinidad, around expanding on the young leaders, the young folks that you guys have put in place, what they're, just talk through some of what it's been looking like for them when we come back. But Ms. Deborah, around the values.
Yes, I definitely, everything that Trinidad said, I completely agree with. The values that undergird our work are, of course, equity and equality, because sometimes most of the times our participants are looked at as criminals. And so I've even had a participant that was in recovery, and one of the professional staff said, "What did you do to piss somebody off?" So, my workers definitely have to be able to communicate and advocate, but our values, definitely equity, honesty, authenticity. We all have to have the ability to be vulnerable and secure at the same time, because when we show up to support these survivors, it is us who have to prove ourselves to be who we show up to say we are. We all the time have to show up in our truth. I have a staff of 10, and 2 are full-time caseworkers, and I have 7 part-time caseworkers. And as Eddie alluded to before, my full part-time caseworkers, they have full-time jobs. However, they are so committed and they so want to support these participants that they have been with me for the entire 5 years. I think I have lost one person. We mentor, support, advocate for the participants in the community. We support them at their doctor appointments, in court, community services, and so we have to, and in order for us to do this, we do have funding from Louisville Metro Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhood, Jewish Heritage Fund for Excellence, and Moms Demand Action. But as Anthony said, there's always the need. I spend my funds very carefully because I don't want to run out. Because as I'll talk about in a little bit, is that, these injuries are life-changing, especially if someone is disabled. So it puts them on the lower level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, equity, honesty, authenticity. And as the supervisor, I also have to be able to recognize secondary trauma, because when I see my staff being overwhelmed, I have to really push them and say, go sit down and stay away for a couple of days, because secondary trauma is a part of it. Not to mention the fact that we as human beings also have our own personal trauma. And so we have to learn how to balance our trauma and to support other people. And that's why I say we have to show up vulnerable yet confident. So those are the values undergirding our work: just to be our best, to do our best, to be honest and authentic in everything that we say and do, whether it's directly with the participants, whether it's at the doctor's appointment, whether it's in court. Because sometimes, I've just had some incidents where they have had major surgery and are dismissed and say, go to the Walgreens or Kroger's and get some Tylenol or Advil. So there are many ways that the greater community does not even realize how we have to work for and with our people.
No, thank you for that, Ms. Deborah. And thank you for reminding us that young people who are shot and not killed, what they have to deal with post, right? And that trauma. And sometimes it's not even just that their lives are changed forever. And I think we as a community sometimes forget that and just move on to the next, right? Because we hear it and we move on and we forget that they're going to have to go through a healing process, and that healing process sometimes is physical and mental, and how we pay attention to that. Trinidad, can you go back to you really focused in on centering those most impacted, those most, the young people in this conversation? What does that look like for you all? And what have you all seen as that outcome of doing that?
Yes, sir. So, we, as I mentioned, we hire young people primarily from the West End. We opened it up a couple of years thereafter. But, all right, so they come in with, internalized oppression, as we all to varying extents have to contend with, based on, right, being indoctrinated into hierarchies of supremacy and white supremacy. So they come in, and so if our aim is to engage in justice, equity, and liberation-oriented work, we got to contend with that internalized oppression, right? And so some of their paradigms at the outset have been, well, Black people, we really don't have problems. I'm from 34th and Market. I have a single mother who's raised me. I'm on the honor roll and I plan to go to college, right? So, right, bam, there's your proof that we can do it. What you got to say about that? And so, as part of our process, though, our socio-political development process, that entails engaging them in critical elements of our society. And so what I mean by that is critical literature, whether it's academic in nature, whether it's popular in nature, critical film, also engaging them and immersing them in practical activities and initiatives, right? So taking trips to historic landmarks where they can learn about history, in real time and become connected emotionally with some of the generational traumas that facilitate the contemporary legacies that impact their lives every single day. And so after being exposed to, structures, systems, and policies such as redlining, such as, a lot of the policies that existed during the Jim Crow era and how they are still in existence today, but they're just more refined, right? So after they have been exposed to this critical information and can become more delineative and explicit about, wow, this is exactly how this policy relates to my life today, right? March 25th, 2021, this is how this has impacted not just my life, but my parents' life, my grandparents' life, and how, some of them have kids, right? This is right, led in my environment for my little kid, right? This is how this is impacting their ability to learn, to thrive, etc. That gives them a totally new perspective. And so, as I mentioned, one of the young persons who came in with the paradigm of, we just need to get to work. We don't have problems. After, essentially engaging in that critical paradigm shift, he started a Black Student Union at his high school, PRP. And so upon approaching and implementing, that initiative, he was faced with a lot of backlash, primarily from white students and white parents, right? So white parents calling the principals saying, this is reverse racism. I'm removing my kids from PRP if you all let this initiative move forward. Some of the white kids making racist comments, during the school day. And essentially, what I told them, initially it was a process, right? So we went through the process. We identified what within the JCPS system facilitates equity and justice, right? So they have programs for Black men and boys. They have an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Poverty, right? So his worry was, I'm creating something that is geared towards the Black community. What if they deem that as racist? And I said, no, we have to go back to systemically how we are responding to supremacy and what we need to do to intervene. And so JCPS uses this language, right? So we're covered from the systems perspective, and we'll deal with the other ecological factors when they arise. And so they arise in the form of resistance. And again, as a young person engaging in development, I coached him through the process, but ultimately I told him, whenever you feel like this has become too overwhelming for you, let me know. And as the adult, as the support system for you, myself and the community will uprise on your behalf against the supremacy and the oppression. Ultimately, it was worked out, and he moved forward with the Black Student Union, and kids of multiple racial ethnic identity engaged and participated. And what he was able to observe was the same thing he observed with himself, right? Was the level of critical consciousness shifts that occurred within his student population. Additionally, I mentioned Family Dollar. A couple of years ago, they applied for their liquor license, and they applied for their liquor license for all 20-something stores that sit within the West and South Louisville. Well, what do we know about those geographic areas of our city? West Louisville contains the most concentrated number of Blacks, and South Louisville contains the most concentrated number of people of color, right? So that's predatory capitalism upon Black and other people of color. And so council persons, some of my young people engaged in making the public aware, created petitions, went door knocking. My young people went to different youth serving organizations throughout the city to inform them on why this is important for us to oppose. When we talk about going back to interpersonal violence, if you look at the CDC's socio-ecological model, alcohol and substance abuse is one of the top risk factors for interpersonal violence. And so if we know that, and within our city, we have an interpersonal violence issue, why in the hell don't we have an ordinance or something within the land development code that says per capita, there can only exist so many liquor store outlets to sell these toxins within our community? That doesn't exist. It exists. So we as Black people and them as young people consistently find themselves having to fight against these consistent threats, whether they're at the interpersonal level or the policy and the society level. But anyway, engaged in that process of fighting, And so months later, the Alcohol Board Control rendered their decision to not grant Family Dollar their license, and the top citation that they rendered was due to community opposition. And so for the young people, it was big. It was like, damn, we actually protested, we actually engaged in collecting signatures and presenting them to an official body, and they actually listened and responded to our community wants. That was big for them. That blew their minds, because that gave them, that gave them a sense of, one, empowerment, but two, my existence is much bigger than the marginalizing narrative that has been created by me, by society. And so, those are some of the examples that of the critical work that they've been able to engage in and lead due to paradigm shifts. And I also want to mention, when we talk about hiring young people from structurally marginalized environments, when we're hiring them, we're hiring every fiber of their being, right? So some are coming in with paradigms of, hey, you know, we don't need to address issues. Some are coming in with paradigms of, you know, I'm engaged in street life, and this, I have to continue to engage in this lifestyle in order to meet my needs. We got to understand that. We have to deal with that, right? And so there was talk about firing some of our young people. I'm like, nah, not while Trinidad is working here, right? We will as adults and as a system reorient our paradigms to identify what we need to do to protect them from their interpersonal plights with internalized racism, with internalized oppression, and the bigger issue that is supremacy, and namely white supremacy. So we have to deal with all of that. And so when I talk about blood, sweat, and tears that I've literally, right, had come from my body and fighting for and fighting with these young people, that's real. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Now, much appreciated. And I think, you know, that's not only for you all, that's a value that we all need to take in. Those of us who take on summer work employees, those of us who do any of this work with young people need to listen and hear that, because that's so real. And I think, you know, we need to shift our paradigm and be ready and take in our young people. So I appreciate that, Trinidad. Dr. Woods, you brought it up. You all respond to the scene. You guys are like first responders. You're in the mix, and you've been doing it during COVID. How has COVID impacted your work, and how you all are able to respond? And then on top of that, how have you all been able to actually get information to those who you're responding to about the dangers of COVID?
A lot of it has been through what is our normal canvassing, but our normal canvassing has taken on the addition of Zooms and video chats and those kind of things like that as well, and making use of social media. I posted sometime early in 2020 that the COVID would not impact street level violence, gun violence. It wouldn't impact it like that, and it did not. You know, I told folks that. I also told folks that if we didn't figure out a way to keep our people who had to do the work safe, and that was incumbent on me. I had to basically work that part out myself. How you going to keep your people safe when you know they got to go out, when you know they got to go deal with folks who aren't really amenable to programs or anything like that, you know. And Trinidad made a good point that I want to kind of deal with a little bit as well. You know, when he said you got to basically understand where a person's coming from, and I'm paraphrasing this, and not let that be something that deters you from doing the work.
That's right.
Because the work is huge important for everybody, you know, because when a bullet hits a target, it changes everything. And it's very expensive, in case folks didn't really understand the financial dynamics of a bullet hitting the target. You got a lot of folks that become involved with a situation where the bullet hits the target, you know, that have to get paid. They're all getting paid. So for us, you know, in order for to change the dynamic and change the direction of a person who thinks that that gun violence is the first response to everything, we got to get them program ready. We got to get them program and employment ready, because a lot of the young folks that we deal with, as well as some of the older ones, they don't know anything about maintaining a job or keeping an appointment or those kinds of things like that. So we got to work in those areas with them. We got to kind of deal with the whole idea that we got to help this person become a better person. We can't mold them in our image or none of that. We can't mold them in society's image. We got to pick them up from where they are and let them play in some positive arenas. Let them be around some folks that they've never been around before. They know how to negotiate a corner or an alley or a street or a trap house. They know all of that. We got to teach them how to do something different that don't involve looking over your shoulder or having to carry a pistol, having to carry a weapon. And sometimes it comes down to something as simple, and we've had several cases like this. It comes down to something as simple as telling a kid's parent that your boy's carrying a gun, you know, or your daughter's hiding dope for this jerk that she thinks is cool. You know, we sometimes have to broaden the network to include folks that we think already know. We think they already are tuned into what their kid is doing. And then we got to stop this whole thing around thinking that if a child is in school, then they're cool. That everything's comfortable for 6.5 hours a day. When in fact, it very well could be that school is not much more than a networking spot for the individuals. So we got to tune into making educators aware of what this whole gun violence thing encompasses. It touches every one of us in all kinds of weird ways, in all kinds of ways. So, and I like to say to folks when I'm doing presentations, none of us, no individual knows when they might run into an idiot, a person that doesn't have anything on their mind except mayhem, or creating some situation based on false narratives and crap that they've been listening to or paying attention to. So their response is going to be that everybody's going to remember me forever, and they go out and do something nutty. On an individual level, a lot of our young people think in those terms, but not in terms of mass mayhem. They see a person who has been a enemy of theirs or a person who killed their loved one as being very similar to a war situation, to where this person is an op, this person is an individual that has to leave this earth. And I'm going to make sure that happens. I'm old enough now, and I'm going to make sure that happens. So for no more red dots, it becomes an issue of being able to identify those individuals. And we've had a database of shooters since 1995. We keep up with the movements and all of those kinds of things, you know, and then how we can get at them, who we can get at that can give us an intro to the family, give us an intro to that individual or that particular group that is maintaining some level of influence with this individual. So the other part is this, and I'll stop with this. At least I'll stop for right now. The other part is this. There are individuals in our community who we call street influencers. They carry a lot of weight with our young people. We from time to time have to go to them and ask them not to employ or have anybody on your street team that is under 18 years of age. And we've had some luck in getting them to go along with that because they have kids, they have family members that they don't even have involved in the mess that they're creating. You know, so we have to go to them with that particular message. But the other part of it is this. It's way bigger than a particular piece of let's identify a root problem and concentrate on that. It's a multi-tentacle, multi-headed beast that does not adhere to any kind of rules that we set up as a community. There are a whole nother set of norms in the subculture of violence that don't have anything to do with any kind of history books, none of those kind of things like that. So we got to teach that. We got to teach them where you came from. If you understand where you came from, then you got a real shot at changing where you're going. And it really comes down to something being just that simple. So we try to expose them to a lot of things and being around a lot of people. And that includes some people on this call. I mean, I use I use everybody that I meet that can bring the message. And we don't have any kind of barriers relevant to color or how much change you got in your pocket, none of that. Our whole thing is that we have to have a person around something that changes the direction of their life.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. And thank you, Trinidad and Ms. Deborah. We're going to move. I was going to look for some other questions, but I want to move into the canned conversations. So I'm going to transfer to Ashley so that we can go into our breakouts and then come back and have more discussion.
Yep. Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Yep. So that was really, really, really robust conversation. So let's kind of take what we heard from those conversations into our Candid breakout groups. As a reminder, we use this time to build and strengthen relationships with folks that you may not already know. Every time I enter a small breakout group, I'm talking to somebody that I have never had a connection with. So it's an opportunity to build those type of relationships, and also think about how we can take some of the ideas that come out of these sessions and turn them towards action steps. What can we do to support particularly the things that we heard today that are challenges in public safety? So I want you to go into these breakout groups and address 3 key questions. One is, what reflections do you have? I'm sure you have a lot of reflections. What questions do you have? What more would you like to know? What can nonprofits do to engage, support these organizations and others to increase public safety? And I would also say, there are a couple of foundations on the call too. What are your reflections, and how can foundations engage a little differently maybe than they've done in the past around this issue? I also want to note that, we did have, as Ann mentioned, Chief James come in as our first discussion with the city, and Monique Williams from the Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods. And, I encourage this group to continue to reach out to them to talk about, from the Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods perspective, what is their strategy? What are their needs? What are they doing? So reach out to them and continue to have dialogue with them. I've also had a couple of folks reach out to meet with Chief Shields. I really agree that we need to do what we can to get her connected to community, and she needs to understand the real landscape of, the challenges that we're dealing with here. And so if you are interested in bringing Chief Shields to a meeting that you all know is happening on a regular basis, reach out to me, and then I'll make sure you get connected to her scheduler so we can make that happen. So now we're going to move into our Candid breakout groups. So we only have about 15 minutes to have some discussion, and then we're going to come back as a group and talk about broader reflections, and then also use our panelists to kind of bounce off of. So with that, let's go ahead and break out.